Hello again. Thank you for all of your thoughts and theories on our stories so far. How do you feel about another poltergeist case? They are the most terrifying and attention-grabbing of hauntings, aren't they? Where objects seem to do the impossible, and sometimes the danger is palpable. We've got that right now. I want you to picture yourselves in South Shields, a seaside town just outside Newcastle in the northeast of England. It's famous for its beaches and its fish and chips, but we're headed for a quiet road called Lock Street and an ordinary two-story house where back in 2005, a family was terrorised by something they could not explain. Many of our cold cases this series have been historical. This is different. It is the first big poltergeist case of the digital age. Expect haunted phones and gadgets and some truly disturbing communications with something that appears to intend this young family harm. Can we explain it? I'm Danny Robbins, and this is Uncanny Cold Cases.
Secrets still remain.
How are you? This is a case that I have been fascinated by for a long time, partly because I grew up not too far from where it happened in the northeast of England, but also because it is packed with phenomena and our favourite thing, reliable witnesses, both in the shape of the family at the heart of it and a pair of investigators who meticulously document the activity. But before we get into it, let me introduce you to our own pair of paranormal investigators, King of Skeptics, Dr. Ciarán O'Keefe, and Team Believers, Secret Weapon, Evelyn Hollow. Evelyn, we've looked at a lot of historic hauntings recently in this series. We've had HMS Asp, Cock Lane, Spring Hill Jack. This is a really modern case.
This is the early 2000s. And I think what this case affords us is that modern lens, because in older cases, we're relying on newspaper articles, we're relying on stories, very little photographic evidence. But because this is happening in modern times, we have things that we can look at. But very uniquely in this case, we have two actual investigators working on it.
That's a good point, Ciarán, isn't it? It's a really well-documented case.
It is really well documented, even to the extent where, a colleague of mine went and spoke to the investigators and was presented with almost 500 photos documenting some of the, phenomena that had been captured. So it's great that we've got a case that has been systematically investigated and that we've got some evidence to pull through.
All right, thank you both. I'm excited to get into this, excited and a little bit scared. We are going to jump back to December 2005. South Shields is a coastal town, a short drive from the city of Newcastle, where I grew up. Marianne Peterworth lives there with her partner Marc and her 3-year-old son Robert at number 42 Lock Street. Marianne is in her early 20s. She's a supervisor in a local care home. That's where she met Marc. He works there in the kitchen. Marianne has a long blonde ponytail. She's warm and empathetic, the kind of person who wants to offer you a cup of tea as soon as you walk through the door. Marc's about the same age. He's handsome with a chiseled jaw, close cropped hair, somebody who always looks for the bright side of any situation. But even he will struggle with what is about to happen. They've been living in the house for a couple of years by this point, but recently they've been bothered by things that they just can't explain. At first, it's a steady drip of small, eerie things. The shower turns itself on when the house is empty. Mugs tip themselves off countertops and smash at their feet. One night, Marianne and Marc swear that they hear a voice coming from Robert's bedroom on the baby monitor, warning them that Robert is about to fall out of bed. They both rush upstairs, but when they get there, there's nobody there, just Robert asleep. They shake it off, but one day, when they get home from a family trip out, Marianne's brother Ian finds Robert's rocking horse hanging by its reins from the loft hatch, still swinging, like something has only just let it go. Odd, right? And their cat and dog have both started freaking out on the upstairs landing. Could be nothing, but one evening, while they're relaxing in the living room, something whispers a single harsh word in Marc's ear. Bitch. He spins round. There's no one there, but Marianne's friend is sitting next to him, and they look pale. Did you hear that? Marc asks. She nods. They're both unnerved. Who the hell just spoke to them? It's only the beginning, though. Marc and Marianne start to find messages scrawled on Robert's doodleboards, those toys, with a magnetic pen that let you wipe and erase messages over and over again. Robert is free, he can't write, and even if he could, these messages would be chilling. The first one simply reads, "Die." Then, returning from another day out, they found a bed and a chest of drawers had been moved while they were out, and Robert's wooden rocking horse has been placed on the landing. Now, this is not a big house. Marc is able to quickly establish that there is no intruder, no untidy burglar hiding in a cupboard. So who moved these things? Shaken and unsure what to do, they put everything back as it was and head downstairs together to have dinner. But before they've even finished eating, they hear noises upstairs. When they go back, Robert's toys are spread all over the place, like a tornado has hit the room, and that wooden rocking horse has somehow made its way back out onto the landing. Marianne is so freaked out that Marc grabs the horse and decides to stick it in the back garden. Locking the back door, they feel reassured enough to go to bed. But in the morning, when Marc and Marianne bring Robert down for breakfast, the first thing they see is that rocking horse sitting, waiting for them in the middle of the kitchen. Truly terrifying. We should probably say, shouldn't we, to anybody wanting to research this case, that the names of the witnesses and the street as well have been changed to respect the family's privacy. Evelyn, where do we start on this? That message on the doodle alone would be enough to give you nightmares. I guess the thing that really strikes me is that this takes place in this coastal town in the northeast of England, this place with a long tradition of ghost stories. Most of them revolve around ghostly smugglers, things like that. This feels so recognisable, so real. The objects being haunted here, seemingly, are ones we'd find familiar from our own homes.
They are. I think most people think that haunting cases are things like bedsheet ghosts and rattling chains, but they're not. We see them everywhere, from new builds to shopping centres to playing fields. And somehow that makes it worse, because you never think it'll happen to you. And when paranormal activity appears to occur in places like your own home and with your own child's toys, it'll destroy you mentally, whether you think it's supernatural or not, because the other option is that someone has broken into the house. What else could it be?
It certainly makes it feel more threatening to us, I think. You're listening and watching this and thinking, if it can happen to these people, it could happen to me. And we've got so much stuff going on already, Ciarán. We've got objects moving, we've got disembodied voices, we've got written messages. These are not things that you want to find popping up in your calendar for that day's activities. We've got a really frightened family here, haven't we? As an investigator yourself, what would be your starting point here? What would you be trying to rule out?
I think with any investigation, I'd be looking at kind of environmental but potentially practical reasons that are somewhat mundane. So, for example, the shower coming on by itself. Is that a simple plumbing problem? If an object's moving, is there something environmental that could be causing that? Vibration or low-frequency sound, something could be causing that. If we're looking at other phenomena, is there something psychological going on? So are the parents very, very tired? They've got a very young child. Are they misinterpreting stuff that they're interpreting then as paranormal? So there's a huge checklist. And at the moment, I'm open-minded to all possibilities, but I'm just keeping an eye out for the phenomena.
It's a small detail, but is it significant, do you think, that the cat and dog react strangely to the landing?
It's something that we see reported quite a lot. People believe that there's something in their house, some sort of presence, and they say that their dog keeps staring at, one spot in the room.
I get so many emails like that. It's something that people put a lot of store by, I think, the idea of an animal sensing things.
They do, but there's an explanation for that, and that might be that animals have a different perception of sight and sound to us, and so they'll be able to see tiny things like bugs that we can't see. They'll be able to react to drafts and temperature changes. But on the flip side of that, if you look at it from a paranormal angle, their sense of colour is different to ours. They can see a different spectrum and they can hear a different spectrum. If you blow a dog whistle, we hear nothing, but a dog starts barking incessantly. And that's not magic. It's just because of their difference in perception. And so does that give us an explanation as to why children and animals seem particularly sensitive to paranormal phenomena? Because they are literally and physically seeing and hearing things that we can't, simply because our brains have developed a different way, or the cones in our eyes are processing different information.
They experience the world in a different way. Ciarán, speaking of animals, we've got to talk about this rocking horse. It is locked out in the garden. It finds its way back into the kitchen. How is this possible? Can a rocking horse open a back door with its rocking hooves?
I don't think it can. It would be amazing if that's what we had in terms of evidence. I think we've got to be careful about interpreting this. Do we know for sure that that rocking horse was out in the back garden? What evidence do we have that the garden was checked? How do we know that the rocking horse wasn't just brought out from the back garden and brought back into the house at some point, but that was forgotten? So there's lots of points that I would like to know and like to get verification of before I jump to the idea that a rocking horse can open the back door by itself.
Okay, the horse is rocking, don't bother knocking. Evelyn, we've got an interesting dynamic here. We've had family hauntings before this series. We've had hauntings revolving around kids. We've got this couple at the heart of this. And I guess I'm wondering, is it reassuring to be facing this with somebody you love? Or is it the opposite? Do you start looking at them and wondering if they could somehow be responsible?
Yeah, it definitely gives us a different dynamic, because if it's not an intruder and it's not a paranormal force, then you would be left with it being it's one of you two. And that is obviously incredibly damaging. But even if it's not and it is something paranormal, it creates a level of anxiety. It creates a level of paranoia. You start to not trust each other.
We talk about a focus sometimes in a paranormal case, don't we? About it being drawn to one particular person. If that is one of you, if you're in a couple, I mean, you do not want to be close to that person.
No, and there's no escaping it because you live together, and also there's a small child involved. You know, people often say to us, well, why don't people just get up and move? You don't want to be driven out of your house. Financially, you probably can't. You can't afford to move. You can't afford to stay in a hotel every single night. And what are you supposed to tell your family, your friends? You know, you've got kids in school. Oh, we left. Why? Because our house was haunted. You don't want to be painted as the crazy person. So you stick it out, you endure it, and you hope that it either stops or that you get a rational explanation for it.
All right, fascinating stuff. Let me know your thoughts too on what is going on here. Put them in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, hype and subscribe to spread the word about these videos. Let me know if you are team skeptic, team believer, team on the fence, or perhaps even team hiding behind the sofa as we go back to Lock Street in South Shields, because things have not let up at all. In fact, it is about to escalate. So, Robert is Marianne's son. Marc is his stepdad. He's a friendly child, unusually articulate for a 3-year-old. He's not scared of strangers. He'll chatter to anyone who'll listen. In fact, Marianne has often heard him talking away in his room. If she asks him about it, he says he's talking to his friend, Sammy. He comes to play with me in my room, Robert says. Marianne can't see Sammy, but she doesn't think too much of it at first. It's just kids and their imaginations, right? But Sammy keeps cropping up. He's a young kid, Robert explains, just like him. Robert only likes Sammy sometimes, because other times he's mean. He throws things. And when Robert tells him to stop, Sammy doesn't always listen. And he pushed me over, he says. But so far so normal, Marianne feels, until one day, Robert gives her a strange detail. He has bubbles, Robert says, on his skin from where he got burnt in the fire. It's unsettling, and Sammy isn't the only person Robert mentions. On 18th July 2006, he's in the living room trying to get his mum's attention. "Ma'am," he says, "there's a man here." Words no parent ever wants to hear from their child, right? Marianne follows his eye line to the corner of the living room. She's got a bad feeling in the pit of her stomach, but at first, she can't see anything wrong until her eye is drawn down to the sofa seat. It is pushed in, a deep impression, like somebody heavy is sitting on it, watching them. Marianne is freaked out now, but hides her fear from Robert. They head upstairs to Robert's bedroom, but when they get there, he tells her that the man is there too, flying over his bed. Marianne is scared now. She lets out a few choice swear words, and as if in return, a can of body spray is thrown at her, hitting the back of her head. Who threw it? Only she and Robert are in this room, and he is standing right by her. It marks a shift. The poltergeist, if that's what it is, appears to be developing a particularly mean sense of humor. Over the coming weeks, chairs are pulled out from underneath both Marc and Marianne as they go to sit down, leaving them falling bruised on the floor. Coins drop noisily to the kitchen floor, seemingly from nowhere. Robert has a handful of beloved talking toys that start to go off without interaction. Marianne gets so freaked out, she takes the batteries out. They play their tunes anyway, by themselves, in empty rooms. What is causing all of this? Could it be linked to the man that Robert sees? How does that man link to Sammy? For Marc and Marianne, it starts to feel like a nightmare brought to vivid life. Ciarán, let us look at the testimony of Robert, this young boy here. He describes that detail about this person he sees, Sammy, as having bubbles on the skin, horrible, creepy detail. Now, we talked about this a bit on the Sandown Clown case. We've got to consider here, haven't we, the possibility of an imaginary friend.
Yes, we do, but also we've got to consider how sensitive Robert is to the environment. Evelyn was talking about it in terms of potential sensitivity to something paranormal. He could also be sensitive to the parents. The parents will be worried, they'll be fearful, they'll be anxious, and we know that children can basically act as sponges and get all of that information from them, even if the parents are not communicating those fears and worries to Robert. And he might be picking that up, and that then results in quite a negative imaginary friend that
It's
he's
a
got.
really important detail, but Evelyn, he's 3 years old. Where's he getting these details from, this idea of somebody burnt with bubbled skin?
Yeah, this is really odd because obviously he is very young. Is he looking at burn victims on telly, in the newspapers? How is he able to piece that together? He's not just saying, oh, the boy has got bubbly skin, and then we're inferring, oh, he must be burnt or something must have happened to him. So is it a case that when we look at the history of the house, are we expecting to find out that there was a fire on the property or a fire nearby, maybe in a neighbouring house? Where has this come from? And also for the parents, it's going to be scary because imaginary friend is one thing. The burnt boy that's pushing you and doing weird things in the house feels threatening. It feels like their child is in danger.
Also, we got one very unimaginary detail, which is that imprint in the sofa. How on earth do we explain that?
Yeah, if everything else is sort of like noises and disembodied things and, you hear a noise in a room and you go through and something's moved or something's been broken, but you didn't see it directly, that's one thing. It's different when something inexplicable is visually occurring in front of you in real time. And for the parents, it's a case of them trying to protect their child. They don't want the child to know that they are also afraid.
You talked earlier about the idea of kids being more receptive to the paranormal. If we do set any store by this, if we feel it could be potentially paranormal, are Sammy and the man somehow linked?
Yeah, this is an interesting point because if it's just one of them, then we can go, okay, well, why is he seeing that? Can we ask him more questions about that? Can the parents ask to get more information? Can we look at the history of the house? But then it shifts because then there seems to be something else. So is it that both of them are supernatural? Is it that one of them is an imaginary friend and the other one is something else that is supernatural? I think if it was straightforward, it wouldn't be as interesting for us. It wouldn't be a case that has endured or stood the test of time. It's easy to point to one thing and be like, it was this ghost, this thing, rather than saying there's multiple different aspects of psychology at play.
Hell of a lot to think about. Ciarán, we've got a litany of things happening now in this case that feel very real world as well. Chairs being pulled out from under people so they injure themselves, coins flying through the air, and electronic toys playing when their batteries are removed. Hard to explain.
Yes, very hard to explain. And I'd have to be looking for a skeptical explanation for each of the phenomena rather than one thing that could explain them all. But maybe the process of thinking that I'm going through is the same thing that Marianne would be doing. There is so much happening here. Is it paranormal, or is there something that can explain each of these things? And all of this will be whirring through her mind. I need to protect my son, protect my family. But essentially, what do I do now?
So put yourself in her shoes. You've got what she feels is demonic messages coming through her child's doodle. She's got a bruised bum from being pulled off her chair. She's got things flying around the house. She is utterly bloody terrified. What do you do?
Well, I think the only thing that you can do, and that's answer the question, who you're going to call. She is going to call 2 investigators, and she does. She calls Darren Ritson and Mike Hallowell. I've met them both. And I know about the case and I know about their investigation of the case, even to the extent where I have scientific colleagues who have worked with Darren and re-examined the data and published it in a journal. Now, if this was an investigation that we wouldn't put any kind of weight to, or if it was a case that we wouldn't put any weight to, then why would you have scientific colleagues reanalyzing the data and even paying any attention to it and publishing it in a journal. Their reputation would be in shatters if there was nothing to this. So given that you've now got Darren and Mike involved as investigators, it really gives us kind of a systematic way of examining this phenomena.
Well, let us see what Darren and Mike make of what is happening in South Shields. We'll join them just a couple of hours after they arrive at the house. They're setting up cameras and recording equipment, trying to be methodical, scientific. But Mike feels what he describes as a change in the atmosphere, a cold plunge in temperature, and an oppressive feeling, like something is about to happen. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he sees something so subtle, he can't quite describe it. It's a movement or a shimmer. Then, a bright yellow piece of plastic, the nut that goes with a screw from a toy workbench, flies through the air and strikes Marianne with such force that it makes an audible crack, and she yelps with pain. Darren and Mike have just got their first glimpse of the South Shields poltergeist. For Marc and Marianne, it's a relief to have the investigators around. They feel like they're being taken seriously now. But the steady drip of unexplained activity is taking its toll on both of them. So, one evening in late July, Marianne and Marc decide to try a long shot. They go into Robert's bedroom and attempt to talk to Sammy to make him understand that if he is behind the phenomena, they want it to end. Marc goes first. He says, "If this is you, Sammy, you have to stop it now. If you frighten us, you might bring other things into the house, and if you do that, we won't be able to stay here." And then they hear a thump that seems to be coming from the cupboard in the corner of the room. One of Robert's doodleboards is face down on the floor. Marianne goes over and picks it up. It has a message on it. It simply says, "I am sorry." Marianne erases the message, puts the board back into the cupboard. It's her turn. She tells Sammy he must stop being naughty. They wait a minute or two, and then she goes to the cupboard again. She picks the board up and holds it up so Marc can see it. There's another message. "Okay, ma'am, but the..." And then a kind of drawing. It looks like an animal. Marc and Marianne are puzzled. Is Sammy trying to say he's afraid of something? They ask Sammy if he'll talk to Darren and Mike, the investigators, but the answer is unambiguous. The word "no," written again and again and again all over the board. But Darren and Mike photograph these messages and take the photographs to 2 different handwriting experts, along with samples of handwriting from everyone who lives in or regularly visits the house. Marc, Marianne, her parents, her brother Ian. The handwriting analysts come back to say that the writing shares characteristics with one of these people. There are similarities, they say, that suggest Marc may be the source of the writing on the boards. It is a huge shock, but Marianne knows that she put the board into that cupboard blank and took it out with writing on it. Marc was on the other side of the room the whole time. If he is writing these messages, nobody can work out how. Bloody hell, Marc. Ciarán, this is quite the twist. Do we have to now consider that Marc is responsible for all of this?
Yeah, I think we do, because we've got, a handwriting analysts involved effectively saying that the writing is responsible by one particular person. All the handwriting seems to match. So that leads us to point our finger at Marc. There's the possibility that it is Marc because all the phenomena seems to focus around him. There's a real sense that the phenomena happens when he's around. So all of those fingers would be pointed at him in that respect. I think we've got a little bit of detail here with some of the phenomena where you kind of go, well, you've got 2 investigators involved saying that when that phenomena happened with the writing, for example, where it's put in the cupboard, Marc was at completely the other side of the room.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Surely. I mean,
Yes.
if he's responsible, how's he doing this? Because Marianne has eyeball on him the whole time, and he's not writing this stuff.
Yeah, I think it would be one thing if we were just relying on the reports of the couple, because there could be confusion. You could feel like, oh no, there's no way they could have got to that. There's no way they could have touched that. But it's different that we've got these investigators and they are present sometimes in the room. And if Marianne is handling the board, and she's the one that puts it away and she's the one that sees that it's clear, and then next time they open the cupboard, she pulls it out and the writing is on it. How has he done that? How has he remotely in 2005 managed to operate the board from the other side of the room?
And we've got some of these images here. Darren Ritson, one of the investigators, has allowed us to show these. We can show these on screen now. This first one shows this board, this doodle board. It's similar to things like an Etch-a-Sketch. People will be familiar with them. It says, "Okay, ma'am, but the," and then this image of what looks like a dog or some kind of animal. Is it significant, Evelyn, that Sammy, if this is Sammy, if we're looking at it from that supernatural point of view, that he is calling Marianne ma'am? He's referring to her as his mum.
Yeah, so the main unusual thing about this writing is that word. So ma'am is Northeastern English dialect for mum. It's spelled M-A-M. And so is it that the person who has written it is of that dialect? They're from that part of the country? Is it that, again, we're talking about the history of the house, if we think it is Sammy or some sort of ghost, were they local? Is that how they would have spoken? Or if it's not Sammy, is it something pretending to be a child, which is arguably worse?
Ciarán, one of the things I love about you is your ingenuity. You come up with brilliant theories to explain things. We've had mould, we've had bioluminescent mushrooms, we've had hallucinatory popcorn. This here, imagine my iPad is this doodle they've got where the writing is. You are Marc across the other side of the room. How do you do it? How do you write on this?
You can't. You can't be at the other side of the room and actually physically cause that writing to happen. Unless, of course, you're dealing with a device like you mentioned about an Etch-a-Sketch that relies on iron filings. There's a magnetic component to it. Maybe you can kind of almost prep the device so that you've got a magnetic component that produces that writing. But judging from your reaction...
I can't let that go! What are you talking about? So it writes through some sort of remote magnetism. It writes, "Okay, ma'am, but the squiggle."
Yeah. Even as I say it, I think how ridiculous that explanation sounds.
Ciarán, go and stand in the corner for that
I'm not going to stand in the
Big
corner.
dunce hat.
No, but the issue I've got here is that it would be so easy for a skeptic to say Marc is responsible for this phenomena, either deliberately, which is very worrying, or through some sort of what we call dissociative state, which could be triggered by anxiety and various other psychological triggers, that he goes into a dissociative state and he doesn't realize that he's doing some of these things. Now, it'd be so easy to point the finger continuously at Marc and say he's responsible for the phenomena. And I can still do that with some of the phenomena. But when you get instances like this, where the person who's this prime suspect is at the other side of the room, it immediately breaks that argument down. So where I am at the moment with this case is that some of the evidence I could explain naturally and put Marc at the centre of it. Other phenomena like this that we're looking at now, this writing, I go, that is not Marc. So what is the explanation for it? And I find it difficult.
Could he be responsible in an entirely different way? Could he be the focus for this haunting? Could this thing, if it's a paranormal entity, be doing it to target Marc in some way?
Yeah, because we're looking at him as a suspect purely because the handwriting analysis has said, there's similarities, between the writing on the board and his. But it's just one person's opinion. It is a professional opinion, but we're hanging it all on that. What if you're right? What if it's actually that it's targeting him or it's latched onto him? We always say that in poltergeist cases, even if it is affecting an entire family or property, it tends to focus on one person.
Just explain that concept of the focus for people less familiar with poltergeist cases.
So typically in a poltergeist case, regardless of if it affects a family, co-workers, or even a group of friends living together, not always, but sometimes it seems to focus on one person. A couple of examples of this would be, say, Janet Hodgson in the Enfield haunting. We had Shirley in the Battersea poltergeist, and then earlier in this series we also had Betty in the Cock Lane poltergeist
The
story.
idea of a ghost addressing you by name is chilling, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what are you really supposed to do with that? If you believe it's something paranormal and it's not just a series of random events, then it is something with agency and agenda that can write, that can speak a language, then it has intention. And if it has intelligence and intention, then it can create harm.
Thank you both. There is so much, isn't there? It already feels really hard to explain about this case. So how are you getting on trying to work it out? Let me know your theories in the comments and hit those like, hype and subscribe buttons whilst you're there. But don't go anywhere just yet, because I'm afraid that what happens next is even harder to explain. Marc and Marianne are sitting on the sofa one night in the living room watching TV together when there's a ping as Marianne receives a text on her phone. It says, "Get you, bitch." But it's spelled B-I-C-H. The spelling is terrible, but Marianne gets the gist. She stares at it. It's been sent from Marc's phone. First to handwriting experts, now this. It is not looking good for Marc. She shows him the text. Marc is freaked out too. He takes his phone out of his pocket and shows her the screen. His phone is out of battery, but he wants to be sure that Marianne knows that he did not send her this message. So he takes the battery out of his phone and puts it on the table between them. They sit and look at it together. Ping, another message arrives on Marianne's phone. "You're dead," it says. Again, the message looks like it's been sent from Marc's phone. Marianne calls Mike, the investigator. He lives close by, so he comes over. He's there when the next text arrives. "It you, bitch." Mike takes a good look at Marc's phone. There's no residual power. He slides the SIM card out too and places it on the table next to the battery. Ping, another message comes through. "The bitch will die today." Marianne is so desperate for it to stop that she turns her own phone off. But then the landline rings. Marianne answers hesitantly. She is met with a flat, robotic voice, the kind that you get when somebody sends a text message to your landline by mistake. "The bitch will die today. Bitch gonna get you." And then, at the very end, a different, almost childlike vibe. "Okay, man." Ciarán, this is properly terrifying, heart-in-mouth, real-life horror movie stuff.
It is, and I think if I was an investigator, I would be genuinely scared by what's coming through here. I would still be thinking there might be a human hand at play, but the nature of the messages is particularly worrying, and it takes the case into a more terrifying level for me.
So disturbing. We talked about this as being a really modern haunting. It doesn't get much more modern than a haunted mobile phone. Evan, the big question I have to ask you, everybody will be wondering this, can ghosts text?
And not well, apparently, judging by the misspellings of some of the messages. Yeah, illiterate ghosts. The thing is that number one most reported type of phenomena we see in every case is interference with electrical equipment. And so rather than us thinking, okay, some sort of like bedsheet ghost sitting down and typing out a message, it's more to do with just electricity being manipulated so that these messages result. And we see that from the fact that we think initially it's Marc, it's coming from his phone, but the battery's taken out, and yet the messages continue, then it goes to the landline. So there's nobody physically there typing them out, and yet they still come through, and that's what makes it supernatural.
So much has happened in this case so far, so much still to come. In fact, so much that we're going to do another part about this. It's a two-part story. What should we be looking out for next time?
Well, so if it's a poltergeist case, and we've already escalated up to communication, we are now at the point where threatening messages are starting to receive. So this is usually the point where we see destruction, we see a lot of physical threat, we might see physical injury. But I mean, we're already there. Like this is part one, and we're already ending on threat to life. And so where is there to go from in part two?
All right, thank you both so much for joining me, and thank you for watching as well. If you've got questions, comments, theories, don't keep them to yourself. Let me know in the comments down below, or email uncanny@bbc.co.uk, or find me, Danny Robbins, on social media. I will see you in a week's time back in South Shields.
No matter how you spin it, there is violence going on, and there is a potential threat to life.
If somebody's life is being threatened repeatedly again and again every single day by some sort of unseen force, then what does it want? Is it only going to stop when somebody is hurt? Is it only going to stop when they're driven from the house?
Until then, sleep well. Don't have nightmares.
Secret still